All right, so news of the day. I know it's late in the day to be doing this, but when news breaks, and you go through, and today I started late with stuff too, and I had other stuff I was doing, so live stream for about 2 hours today on Patreon. So thanks for those who came out. That was kind of fun. And of course, that's every Monday, where it's kind of like a casual Q&A, usually like a dozen people in it. Let's get into the news that just broke not too long ago. The Chicago Blackhawks fired the president and CEO, John McDonough. Now, he'd been with the team since 2007 and a part of Chicago sports going way back before that. He'd worked with the Chicago Cubs as well. And what's interesting is this is a name that is synonymous with when the Hawks started getting good again. So we all know the story of, they rebuilt and they tanked and then they got good. No, they didn't. They were bad. The Chicago Blackhawks were really poorly run through the late 90s and early 2000s. That's how you end up with great draft picks. You have really poor management. And he was part of that change. That change when Rocky Wirtz got in there too instead of Bill Wirtz. No offense to Bill Wirtz and all that he did. Because honestly, Bill Wirtz takes a lot of hate. And I think some of it's deserved and some of it isn't. But to see somebody else going out the door, it's similar to Quenneville in that it's kind of a surprise, and yet they're trying to change the whole culture around the Chicago Blackhawks. So good luck to them, honestly. And Rocky's saying that they're going to start the process of picking a new president and CEO. So they don't have anybody else in mind that they've tipped their hand to necessarily to take over the team. Emilio Pettersson signs his entry-level contract with the Calgary Flames, Norwegian-born actually, and he's out of the University of Denver. 36 games played this year. In his sophomore year, 13 goals, 22 assists, 35 points. Sixth-round draft pick in 2018. Well done. So we'll see whether or not he pushes for a roster spot. You can't think it's going to be this year, but probably next year. So we'll see. But either way, it's an entry-level contract. It's 3 years. There's no harm in that. Now, this came out today, and I understand this, and I think there's two ways to look at this. So it's an anonymous source that is being put out there on TSN that the AHL season is likely getting canceled. And I thought they'd already canceled it, but I guess the ECHL they canceled and the AHL they put on hold. Now, if the NHL is going to play, here's a question that's been asked. So let's say the Hawks are out there and Kane gets hurt, and they got to call somebody up. Well, how's that going to work? You can't call people up. The way this is going to work, it's going to be everybody at a centralized location. You have to think it'll be expanded rosters. You have to think that instead of 23 players, it'll probably be like 30. And so it would make sense if the AHL season just isn't going to happen because logistically, it's going to be hard enough to put together an NHL season, an AHL season from a centralized location or four. I can't see how financially that would work. The NHL can make up a lot of their financial shortfalls by coming up with some sort of a salvaging of the season. I don't see that the AHL could. It's just I don't think it's necessarily worth it. They haven't come out and said for sure that it's not coming back, but again, I think it's highly likely that teams instead are going to say, okay, those guys at the AHL level, if we can get them to self-isolate, we'll have a certain number of players that normally would be at the AHL level. We're going to allow NHL teams to carry extra bodies on their roster because of this unique situation. And then we're going to, there might be a limited window to allow for call-ups, not for demotions. Like, again, this is going to be a fluid situation, but you're going to want the ability to have control over a maximum number of potential players. And that tells me that the AHL probably shouldn't be in the conversation, and it would make a lot of sense for the AHL to call it off. So while there's people who are going to say, oh, that means the NHL is going to call it off too. Not necessarily, because again, it's where you're drawing them from. I remember people telling me a couple weeks ago, hey, the NBA is ready to cancel everything. Get ready, because the NHL is canceling too. Well, we'll get to the NBA, because canceling is not a word they're using either. Joel Ward announced his retirement today. It's kind of an odd way that he did it, but his last games played were in the 2017-2018 season for the Sharks. Good, solid bottom six forward, 726 career games, 133 goals, 171 assists, 304 points. Yes, there will be a career video on Joel Ward because he's the kind of player that I find myself rooting for. He had a couple of 20-goal seasons in there, useful player, good character guy along the way for the Sharks when they got to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2016. pretty decent run for him, and definitely worthy of having a career video made on him. Now, he didn't play for enough teams to qualify as a journeyman, but I'll figure out some category to throw in there. So Joel Ward, congratulations on a solid career. Now, the Oilers, and this is being rumored by Ryan Rishaug. Ryan Rishaug's pretty reliable, so I have no problem with this. Gaetan Haas is apparently agreeing to re-sign. They just haven't announced it yet, which makes sense. Haas has been a very useful forward for them. Not a lot of offense, but they don't need the offense from him. He just plays a decent, solid two-way game. Doesn't hurt them. When you're looking at bottom six forwards, one of the first questions you're going to ask is, does he hurt the team? And when the answer is, no, not really, then there's no reason to get rid of the guy. And Theodor Lennström, a 25-year-old defenseman out of Sweden, is apparently next. So he's a free agent and apparently is going to be signing with Edmonton. It's just a matter of when. And then interestingly, he also reports that players are being told to treat right now, what we're in, is the offseason. So most of them gone to their offseason homes, are being told treat it like the offseason and do this because odds are, if we can make this work, you're going to get a compacted playoff followed by a regular season not too far behind. And we'll get into the dates on this because all of it's still in motion, and this is just, there's a lot of different potentials, but basically players are being told, enjoy the downtime. If we figure out a way to make hockey work, you could be busy for the next 12 months after we get things started. Like, there really won't be much of a break between one season and the next, which is part of the reason why the NHL is looking at maybe holding the draft in June after all, because the off season is going to be tricky. And then talks about player bonuses, how all that's going to work. That's all in motion too. They really haven't made any decision one way or the other on how any of that's going to go. But the fact that the NHL and the NHL Players Association are talking daily on this, I like that. I think this, again, the optimist in me says this can lead to greater negotiations and greater cooperation between both sides, which we've desperately needed in the National Hockey League. We've really needed the players and the owners to knock it off, sit down in a room, and make it work. So maybe this issue we're dealing with right now is finally enough to make that happen. Now, I mentioned the NBA. They're talking about opening practice facilities May 8th. Now, it would have been May 1st was the rumored date. They bumped that back to May 8th. It depends on local municipalities that are allowing it. And they're restricting it to 4 players in a building at a time. So you'll rotate in and rotate out who's on the court and who's allowed to be there. And, of course, there's going to be sanitization in between. And this is just to get things up and going and get the players back into game shape and this kind of stuff. And so the NBA is looking at that and a gradual return to some sense of how to make these games work. Now, for the NBA, they may very well be a week ahead of the NHL. The NHL, there's May 15th is the date that's out there. And this has been through multiple sources. And, of course, John Scott tweeted out that he heard May 15th back to work for everybody. And people thought, well, it's John Scott. He could be trolling us. But odds are there's players who are telling him, I keep hearing May 15th might be the date. And it makes sense that would be your date. And if after May 15th they're not able to get anything going, that's when we'll start hearing, all right, they're just going to cancel the season and shutter it. But between now and May 15th, they don't really have to do it. And that's 2.5 weeks from now for people who don't need calendars and don't know days of the week anymore because it really doesn't matter. That's 2.5 weeks from now, and we'll have a better idea of where we're at then. And I think in between now and then, it's all kind of up in the air. It's obvious they want to figure out some way to make this work. So the roadmap that's being worked on, this is the idea. This is not set in stone. Nothing's set in stone. There hasn't been it, but this is the idea of what they're kind of looking at. And again, Chris Johnston brought this out, and I'd like to throw a thanks out to Chris as well. Honestly, he's been, and I've seen some in the media that are basically, just cancel everything, and others that are focusing on the reopening. Chris been kind of nice down the middle. He's been kind of, on both, bringing out both sides, and appreciate that very much. May 15th to the 31st, you'd have informal small group skates. So again, much like the NBA, you could have it where, okay, you guys get 3 hours of ice and then followed by these guys, and we're going to have 9 hours of ice, and we're going to have everybody practice that way. And then you ramp it up. So June 1st through 30th, you'd have training camps. You might have exhibition. Now, when I see exhibition, that tells me if we're in centralized locations, it could be between teams. But inter-squad games are highly likely as well, I would think. And I would never have been more interested in an inter-squad game than right now. Honestly, you put 2 players on the ice right now with 1 net, and tell, okay, now we're playing keep away and we'll see who gets more goals. I'm watching that. I am absolutely all over that. So I've kind of missed the whole hockey thing. So in June 1st through 30th, we'd have training camps and exhibition. July 1st through September 30th, centralized. So again, through like 2-4 locations, however many there are, regular season and playoffs. Yes, the NHL is also wanting to finish out the regular season in some form, some manner, make it so everybody's played the same number of games, so there's not a whole lot of confusion and upset about it. We may see a change in the playoff structure. Here's what I mean by that. It may just be the top 4 teams in each division make the playoffs. Metro Division fans will lose their minds, but again, if you've got the wild cards and you have, let's say, the New York Rangers would qualify for a wild card spot, but now they have to go from, let's just say they're playing in Miami, and then for the playoffs they got to go from Miami to Toronto, right? So they're trying to limit any and all travel as much as possible in and amongst all of this. So I don't know, maybe, and again, this is just spitballing because that's what the NHL's doing right now as well. And then the idea is that if you finish out the playoffs on September 30th, training camp would open in mid-November. So it is a very short window in which to get free agents done. I think that's where you see the signings of all the bonus money would go there. I think we would see a lot of very, very major trades getting made potentially then as well. Some GMs might feel a little gutsier in the midst of all this. And then we get our training camp in mid-November, followed by mid to late December, the regular season begins. So the regular season could very well get pushed back into mid to late December. And I know people are going to hate that. But if the NHL does this, obviously you got two situations here. Either centralized locations again for the regular season, cutting back on travel. So in a situation where you don't have to worry about teams traveling from one location to another and they're just playing within their division, you have some kind of setup here where teams are either just playing in their division or just inside their own conference. Just, again, to limit the amount of travel. You can make this work, and you can have a team playing 4 games in 7 nights throughout the season and not have them be too exhausted. I think the biggest issue they're going to have now is the 2020-2021 season is not starting on time. It's just not. I don't see a situation where it does, because with everything that's going on right now, I think we're going to get that regular season pushed back. It's the season following it where it's going to be interesting to see if that one starts on time. And so this is very likely to end up getting pushed back, and we'll see. I mean, it's possible they start next season at the right time, but they'd have to make a decision to just cancel all this and just do a regular off season. Then the problem you're going to have is players wouldn't have been on the ice since March 12th, and they may not be on the ice again until September. That's a long time. I know these guys are premier athletes and they're doing everything they can to stay in shape, but that is an extremely long time to be off the ice and not to be able to do your standard workouts. And who knows what kind of season we'd have next year. I'm just thinking of the nightmare you'd have in terms of guys getting hurt because they're ramping up their game and they haven't been on ice in a long time and they haven't been, they haven't got their game shape going. So this is going to be tough. I don't know exactly how this is going to end up looking, but that's the speculated timeline. We'll just have to see. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. As always, don't forget, stay home when you can. Stay safe as possible during all these times that we're living in right now. And hey, thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.